is Charlotte Whitcomb. I'm a professional rider and trainer specializing in the classical methods. I'm originally from Sweden, but after training and working in Portugal, I now live in Cheshire, England. When working with horses, there are many different ways of training. It's a journey where we take the inspirations from different people, experience and disciplines. I love listening to people's story of whom have spent their life working with horses. And so I've had the great privilege to have a conversation with FEI 5-star judge Stephen Clarke. Stephen Clarke has judged all the major competitions such as the Olympics, the European Championships and World Cups. What struck me most when talking to Stephen is his positive outlook in life. His journey is truly inspirational and I hope you will enjoy listening to it as much as I did.
Oh no, I don't care what you ask me.
No, don't worry. Okay, Stephen, I have ridden for you, known you about for 6 years, I think, and have really enjoyed my lessons with you. So I just first want to say thank you so much for coming to this conversation.
My pleasure.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So I would like you first to start to tell me a little bit about your childhood and your first memories connected to horses.
Okay, well, I grew up in a little Welsh village, Glen Conway. My father was the local policeman, and we had a lovely home next to a farm, and the farmer had Welsh mountain ponies, and I was fascinated with them completely from being a small child. And it turned out if you could stay on these ponies without getting bucked off, then you could take them to some shows and things, and that's how it all started.
Yeah.
Welsh ponies, showing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So your parents were not horsey then?
No.
They were not
No,
at all.
not
But
at
did
all.
they support you?
Oh yes, they were great. Yes.
Yeah. So they
Yes.
took you to shows and.
Mostly, in those days you could ride. They were not so far away.
Yeah.
And we used to have a great time.
That's good. So what was the name on you? Do you have one pony in particular that you can remember that taught you something special? Or
Yeah, there was one called Cymro, which is very Welsh.
Okay.
And sort of later on, they had all these sort of trotting races and all sorts of things. And I started sort of show jumping. I finally got my own horse. But to afford to travel, that you had to hire transport.
Yes.
I would take the pony because in Wales in those days, these trotting races had very good prize money.
Okay.
So that used to pay for the jumper to travel.
So did you sit on them or were they
Yes.
a carriage?
No.
Oh, I don't know. So the Welsh ponies did really well in that.
Yes.
Yeah. Who did you look up to in the riding world when growing up?
Well, again, my beginning part was in the jumping side, and David Broom and Harvey Smith competed a lot in North Wales at the sort of big shows, and I thought they were amazing, and they were very kind to me. I had this one Irish horse that I was jumping, and they saw me ride and said, "Oh, you should take that horse to Hickstead." Yes. Well, in those days, to me, Hickstead was like going to the moon, you know. And anyway, they organised everything, picked me up and the horse, and travelled down to Hickstead, and I competed there. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So
So that must have been quite an experience
it
then.
was.
How did you do?
Oh, not too badly, but didn't have that much experience with the speed classes and things, but it was all very exciting.
Oh, it must have been. Tell me a little bit about the trainers that you had.
Well, I started off through the Pony Club, which again in North Wales was very well organised, the Flint and Danby Pony Club. And the one lady that used to come and instruct there, Dorothy Johnson, FBHS,
Yeah.
now the late Dorothy Johnson, but this lady was so clever at making you actually think and work things out for yourself, and she became a lifelong mentor, really. Yeah.
Yeah. Was that dressage or was that?
Yeah, basically everything was based on dressage,
Yeah.
even though we didn't realize it in those days.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. What trainer taught you the most and shaped your career the most?
Oh, I think probably Jenny Lauriston Clarke. She, I'm jumping ahead a few years, but I used to work at the Wirral Riding Centre, and I was the competition rider for them. It was a very clever organisation in those days. It was a training centre for all international students to come and train for the BHS exams, but they would front it with, I was the competition dressage rider, then they had a show jumping rider and a 3-day rider who were all quite well known, and this sort of was the shop window, really. And each year there was the FBHS examinations, which were down at Stoneleigh, and we were always expected to take trained horses, Grand Prix level horses, to be used as guinea pig riders for the people to take their exams. And I used to take one of my older horses, Red Devil, a Russian horse, and he would be used by the candidates to test their riding. And Jenny Lauriston Clarke always brought a couple of horses as well to be used. And we just hit it off. And I also had with me my young up-and-coming Grand Prix horse, Ulysses. And Jenny saw him. I just took him there to work, and she spotted him and said, "Oh, why don't you come for the weekend and bring some horses?" And that's how it all started, really. She let me ride her. She'd just come back from one Olympic Games, I think in Montreal or somewhere, and so she helped me and let me gain test experience on, I think it was Cadet and Dutch Courage. And she helped me with Ulysses a lot. And then she decided that, why don't you go to Vienna for the winter to train? And Ernst Bachinger, who was the then chief rider, trained the sort of British team, and she arranged for him to see me with this horse, and in one of the training sessions in England, and he liked it, and just said, "Oh, just come." So I was very, very lucky that I spent 2 winters
Yeah.
in his private stables just outside Vienna. And in return for him training me with my Grand Prix horse, or just coming Grand Prix, I worked the young horses and some of the more difficult horses and so on. And no, it was a most wonderful experience.
What do you think that experience, was there a difference in what you learned there to what you have learned in the UK with your instructors or your trainers?
Not really. I think, even back in those days, I think the basic principles that were trained into us in this country stood me in good stead for everything. But what I'm really going back a long time now. In those days, the difference was the level of impulsion that the horses went with. Here it was all very nice, and everything was smooth and harmonious. But once I started competing internationally, I realized that I needed to up my game from the point of view of impulsion combined with harmony. And that was what opened my eyes to the more of the international scene.
But do you feel that experience is still very much with you, or have been with you through your career?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it must have been very different, first of all, to go to a different country, a different language, and a completely different, maybe not a different way of thinking, but the system in itself. I don't know if it was more formal or similar to what you had experienced.
It was pretty formal, as you can imagine, with the Spanish riding school. But it's interesting thinking about your background as well, with your classical training. There, I really learned so much about the in-hand work, which you are such an expert at. And one of my roles was in hand there. They always used 2 people. And my responsibility was to sort of control the horse, keep it straight, allow it to cover as much ground forwards as her Bacchinger wanted. But if I ever allowed the horse to become crooked or wasn't travelling forwards enough, or I would be yelled at. So I learned very quickly the subtleties of...
Was it the airs above the ground then? Or was
it was mostly about the piaffe.
Piaffe work.
Yeah. But the guy was a complete artist. And to learn the sort of feel of, when to control and when to relax and when to reward. And
it's a real art.
Fantastic.
And also it's so important when you stand in front to really understand positioning. Because if you move a little bit inwards, you then, of course, lost it all for the horse to have the ability to collect.
Yes.
So it's a difficult thing to be in front.
Yes. But it was all about learning to train a horse to react and then immediately reward it with relaxation. And, the speed of those reactions had to be instant. And, you learned very quickly.
And were there a lot of sort of groundwork experience here in the UK then? Or was that sort of...
Jenny, Lauris and Clarke always did a lot of in-hand work. And also she was very expert with long reins.
Yes.
She did many displays and things. I mean, could virtually on long reins take a horse through the Grand Prix test, which was fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you feel that that kind of tradition is still today, with understanding sort of how the horse work from the ground and the long reining and all that bit, the importance of that bit in the training? Do you feel that is?
Yes, I think it's recognized as being invaluable.
Yeah.
And also later, after all the training in Vienna and with Jenny, I was awarded a scholarship to train with Ferdy Eilberg, who had just come over from Germany.
Yes.
And it was fascinating because it was all the same system.
It was.
You know, and again, he is an absolute perfectionist, and I used to dread the words "come down the centre line and halt at X," because you knew if you didn't get it right the first time, you'd be there for the entire session, coming down the centre line and halting at X. So you learn very quickly about being precise and riding the correct lines, because second best would not do. So if you really wanted to get something out of the sessions, you did it right the first time,
And did you cope with that pressure?
Yes.
You did?
Yes. It's quite interesting. You learn a lot about yourself, I think.
Yeah.
And for me, it was really interesting because I discovered over the years, the more under pressure I was, the better I reacted.
That's maybe why.
Which was surprising.
Yeah, that's maybe why the competition, sort of competing, suited
Yes.
you.
I mean, for me, I was interested in the training at home, but the competitions, that's where you could prove your training. And I really enjoyed those days.
And were there any a time when you were, I can imagine it must have been still a bit of a difference to come from Vienna and then train for 30. Was there any time where you felt lost in the direction? Was it sort of always the same, or did you feel, oh, this method is very different and how can I find my own path? Or did you always feel that your path was quite clear in how to train a horse or in your riding?
Well, I grew up, as a kid with Alois Podolsky's book in one hand. So all those Spanish riding school methods were always ingrained into me from before I even understood what they really meant. So what I did learn in the end, I was very lucky to have a lot of help from great trainers, but I found in the end, if I allowed myself to react instinctively with the horses, it was the horses that taught you.
Yeah, very much so. Is there any horse in particular that you feel have taught you the most as a rider?
I think every horse is different, and you learn many different things from all of the horses. I had not always the easiest of horses, and sometimes my competition horses were originally horses that other people found too difficult. But you find a way to work through difficulties and get the horse on your side. And the main thing is to listen to the horse and react accordingly and fairly,
Yeah, that's very true. Is there any movement? Because sometimes I feel that, like if I look back on a little bit of the horses I've been riding, that in certain stages, there's different things that you find that it can be a bit more tricky. Have you ever been in a situation where you feel like, oh, I can't get those changes to work, or that piaffe to work, or that passage to work? Is there any situation where you felt like where you had to always, or had to really think outside the box to get the movement?
Yes. For me, I always naturally found the trot work, half passes were my sort of thing, really. And the piaffe passage I always found very instinctive and natural. But in the canter work, it was always the changes that were a little bit my issue. And it was really interesting because I was having difficulties with the one-time changes with Ulysses, which was my first horse. And I was at a competition in the warm-up and making a mistake and, trying to correct it. And it was actually David Hunt was also competing. And he was very funny, a little bit sarcastic, and he would canter past because the changes were his thing. And he just looked at me once and said, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, well, I'm trying to do this and I'm trying to do that. And he said, do you not think it's just your canter is not really good enough? And I thought, and we had a discussion, and I worked on improving the activity and the balance of the canter within the collection, and as if by magic, suddenly the changes were easy.
And did that stay with you for the next horses?
That was one of my biggest lessons, I think. So thank you to David.
Yes. It's funny how different people come in just sometimes in the right time, because you can sometimes have heard it from before, but before it sort of clicks.
Yes.
And just to hear it from maybe someone that you don't know as well, or that you're not in that connection, can change it.
And even though we're all after the same thing, I think some people just use a different phrasing, or and it's sort of, you think, oh, why didn't I think of that?
And that's why it's so important that we listen to each other and think that we all have so much, all different kind of professionals in different paths have a story to tell, and that we listen and come together, really.
Yeah. But we were lucky too from that angle. Back in the day, Lady Joycey started this trainers club here, which turned into the British International Trainers Club, which then later was David Hunt was the president of it. And we travelled formally as a group to some of the big international shows, and shared hotels, and we'd sit and watch the warm-ups together, and that was a great way in this country of bringing the experienced trainers together and to learn to work together, rather than there being this camp and that camp. We became friends and turned into a very constructive way of forming the policy of training in this country.
Is that still going?
Not quite. Some of us are long gone, but it formed the basis of really what you're hinting at. Instead of being rivals,
Yes.
we became friends and shared knowledge, and that sort of filtered down through the whole sport, really.
And it's so important, I think, that everyone feels safe, that it's not about competition. Of course, in the competition arena it is, but it's very important we have a safe environment where people can talk and where the guards are let down, I guess, that professional
That's right.
guard a little bit.
Yeah.
What are some of the most significant events or experiences that have shaped you in your riding career?
I don't know really where to start with all that, because there have been so many. But I think it's going through the whole process, really, with many different horses. And I think that's, obviously I became a judge. Became a judge while I was still competing.
Yeah.
But in those days, you had to choose at the beginning of the year, would you act as a judge or would you ride? And I've actually learnt so much from the judging side of things. My students at home, if I'd been to judge a big show like Aachen or something, sitting there as a judge, you see where people gain and lose points, and through silly technical mistakes sometimes. And whenever I'd come home and train the working pupils, it was like, oh God, he's been to Aachen. So, I was very tough on them about precision and, showing clear transitions and all the rest of it.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. And I also think that when you have experience, I think, of course, when you're training people, it's the same when teaching, when you have to put words on things or see things from a different angle, you then also start to understand connection in the training that you maybe wouldn't see otherwise, because we're sort of in our little world. So it must have opened up quite a bit more objective way, maybe, to see what's going on in the arena.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think also when you're exposed to, going into the warm-up with, in high-level famous riders, it can be a bit nerve-wracking. But actually, it's in those environments, I found those were the situations that made me raise my game, because, you're proud and you don't want to make a fool of yourself. So, and suddenly you're surrounded by these highly experienced riders. And I think that really makes you up your game.
Have you ever gone into the competition ring, counted in on that center line and thought, I can't remember, I don't know what I'm going to do now? Like a bit of a blackout.
Yes, I can remember once being so focused on my horse's way of going, I actually went wrong in the test, because I was so busy thinking about what the horse was doing.
Yeah.
Suddenly my mind was blank and I couldn't remember what was coming next.
So what did you have to do? Just stop and start again? Or?
Yes, I can remember the judge saying, relax, just take a moment, and very kind.
Yeah. Did the horse go well?
Yes, it did. So.
We have already gone into that a little bit, but can you recall a horse that has been particularly difficult, that will always stay with you?
Yes, I had a a very interesting horse called Warlocks Wager, who was the strangest breeding. He was a Cleveland Bay Irish Draft cross, and he was very strongly built and had the strangest mindset. He was very insecure.
Yeah.
And things like if you were traveling with 3 horses, he had to go on last because he had to come off first. Because if you put him on first, then took the other 2 away, he would climb out of the, and he was very shy and sensitive and very, very hot. And I can remember learning from him. Actually, the more you did, the more hot he became.
Yeah.
And so I learnt with him, like the warm-up process. He was much better if I did several short periods. And I can remember one year he won our Intermediate 1 national title at Goodwood. But the day before had been a disaster. And so the day of the championship, I got up very early and I would take him down to warm up, do some normal work, 10, 15 minutes, take him back to the stable, let him relax for an hour or so, then do it again. And I did that 5 times.
How early were you up?
Yes. And then just walked down to the arena, picked up the reins and did the test. And he was fine. Yes. But you learn that different horses need different approaches, really.
And how did you find that out? Was that something that you just instinctively went with, or was it together with your trainers, or did it take sort of long time to find out what was the best situation?
I found out about it at home, really, because, I learnt that the first 15, 20 minutes were the best part. And if you went beyond that, he would, get nervous. I thought, oh. So in the end, at home, I discovered working him for short periods of time and then letting him go back in the stable and relax was much more beneficial.
Yeah. And that was quite a different breed then.
Yes.
As well to the other horses.
Yes. Yeah.
A difficult combination also, I guess, if they're quite big and.
Yeah, and he was a very powerful horse, but I learned a lot from training him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you find the canter work easy?
Yes, he was, his best things were actually still the trot work, but he had enormous ability to carry weight on the hind legs, so pirouettes and things he found easy.
What happened to that horse?
He stayed with me. He actually belonged to a very good friend of mine, Sue de Leon, and I met him and her on a training clinic somewhere, and she was finding him particularly difficult. And there was something about the horse, even though he was an unusual type. Yeah. Just his movements, I fell for him, really. And in the end, she said, oh, just why don't you have him? And although she always remained the owner, he stayed with me. He's actually buried on my farm.
Oh, that's nice.
25, I think he made.
25, that's a good age.
Yeah.
So he went up to what kind of level?
He went to Grand Prix.
Yeah.
But it was a slightly unreliable prospect silly things would really upset him. Someone clicking a camera, for instance, that was it. Game over, you know.
So that's why he was. But you felt you could go out with him and sort of produce a nice test, or did you not know what you had?
Well, when I first started competing, it was simple. Either he won easily, or he was last, or I would retire, or something.
Yeah.
You know.
It's so funny though how those horses really stay with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so interesting because when I asked you if you had any photos, we didn't have any digital photos. And that struck me then what, you know, today when we have everything, we take photos with our mobile phones and then we post them on social media, what a different world that was, where you sort of have to, you couldn't just take it out immediately to show the world. Do you think there is a big difference on professionally, as a professional rider, working when you were working to what it is now with what we have with the social media and the access to photos everywhere?
Yes, I think that's a very interesting topic because, you know, back in my day, we were far more isolated. And, you know, that's really why I enjoyed so much going to the high level competitions and being exposed to riding that was, you know, really high class. And that's where I saw and learned. Whereas now, people are so lucky because you only have to turn the computer on and you can watch videos of all the top riders and the competitions and become exposed almost subconsciously to this higher level of riding. Whereas, you know, before all the technology was available, we were more isolated. And you know, people sort of take it for granted now, but I think being exposed, even if it's just on video through a computer, the picture of the riding at a high level sinks in and comes through in your own riding. It's very interesting. Yeah.
I guess there were magazines and things like that where you could, you know, get the information about the competitions and the higher level riders. But was the world a bit smaller then?
Yes,
as well.
definitely. And, you know, I don't think there's any substitute for the visual impression, which now you can access. But back in those days, you couldn't. And no, I think, you know, the sport has developed and changed so much over the years. It's been fascinating to watch it, really. You know, at one time, you could just look in the warm-up and by the style of riding, you could see immediately which country they came from, you know? Whereas now, it's more uniformed. Everyone's working on the same lines. And that's through people working more and more together and there being more access to seeing it all, you know. But you could tell back in the day who was a French rider or a German rider or a Swedish rider. You could see it.
It must have been quite nice, though, also, to sort of see the difference.
Yes.
Did it depend on who they were training for then? Like, could you see which one they trained for in their riding style? Like, did the trainers that sort of in Sweden or France, did they travel around giving clinics, or was it sort of much more insular, if that's the word?
Yeah, I mean, again, nothing was quite so easy in those days.
No.
Whereas now, well, it used to be easy to travel,
Yes.
but you know, when I started traveling with the horses, I mean, it would take me a week to drive my horses from England to Vienna, for instance.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's maybe 2 days.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very different. The world has become a bit
Yeah.
smaller.
Yeah.
Do you think there is any negative also with that it's so easy to post photos and that everything is that accessible on social media or internet?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a negative side to social media, and, you know, horses and riders are not perfect. And sometimes I get a bit upset when, you know, everyone has a bad moment, and sometimes that moment is captured in a split second on camera and splashed all over social media, which I think is rather negative, rather than looking at the whole process. So there are two sides to it. I mean, I think there's a great benefit, but, you know, it's human nature. There's some negativity out there.
Yes.
Which we have to deal with.
Exactly. So if we move on to your judging, when did you get into judging?
I've always been interested, and I can always remember at the beginning, you know, even at a small local competition, the riders would focus around the scoreboard where in those days the marks were written.
Yes.
And yeah, I was always aware of a little bit grumbling going on, you know. And I found, I don't know, I was always rather surprised if I got some good marks, because I was very self-critical, you know. But I did notice there was a little inconsistency, and sometimes it was a little bit negative. And I thought, rather than being one of the people complaining around the scoreboard, why didn't I become a judge and see what it really is like, and if there's something that could be done? And that's what drew me into it. And then actually I found the whole thing fascinating, because it's really difficult. Judging is as difficult as riding, you know. And my principle is always to try to be as fair as possible and to give the appropriate mark to every rider for every movement. And it's what I preach, and it doesn't matter who they are, you know. But it's the pressure of just trying to get it right and to be fair is quite big. And it's another thing I learned about myself, really. A bit like the riding, the more pressure you're under, actually the better I react, you know.
It's good. Good, though. You're in the right.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What characteristics do you think is needed in order to become a judge?
I think it's the ability to look at the whole picture, really, rather than focusing on minor details. The minor details matter, but I think the main thing is that you can see the whole picture of what's going on, and have some appreciation and respect for the riders who are, you know, I always say every rider who comes down the centre line, they're trying 100% to do their best. They don't come in there to deliberately ride a bad test, you know. And as a judge, you have to respect that, but still score realistically. Yeah, it's a difficult one, but I've found again, and I've been in some very high pressure situations as a judge. The more pressure there is, the more simple I become, you know.
That's interesting.
And I only focus on one movement at a time and try to give the appropriate mark for that. I push away whatever's going on around. I don't think, what are my colleagues giving, or what percentage am I at? That's not my business. My responsibility is to the rider to try to give them an appropriate score for every movement. And if you do that, it actually works out mostly.
Does it get lonely? Like when you sit there and judge, of course, everything is happening quite quickly, but do you ever feel a bit lonely in your situation, even if you have colleagues?
No, I don't, because first of all, I'm talking about judging at a higher level. First of all, those colleagues are people that you know and respect and trust, you know, and if I see something that really has to have, you know, a really high mark, I'm not afraid to give it, because I know they will also be reacting. And the same if there's an unfortunate mistake, everyone will come down. And to me, when I'm judging, it's 100% concentration. So all I'm thinking about is what's happening stride by stride. I don't have time to think what's going on around me, or you know.
Do you feel that you have to be careful with words because of the position you're holding?
Yes, I think it's important that the comments you make are balanced and fair. You know, when I'm training judges, I always try and get them to see, first of all, what's the good part of it, because you find your score in the end from a balance between what's good and what's maybe not so good. So I always try to think of the positive side first, and then, but maybe it needs a bit more of this or a bit more of that. So that balances the score and so on. But I think the important thing when you're judging is to tell the truth, but in as politely as possible. You know, because as a judge, you're wearing a different hat. You're not there as their trainer. You're there to almost record what's actually happening. But you know, I'm very careful with that, to try to describe the picture that I'm seeing, but without telling that I'm not there as their trainer in that moment. I'm there to judge the picture. And I always feel if I can describe the picture I'm seeing and why that's appropriate to that mark, then the rider should be able to take their sheet to their trainer and say, here, this is what they're saying. How can we fix it? But it's not my job to fix it as a judge.
Is it difficult because some riders you will see quite a few times because they sort of competing very often, is it difficult to keep yourself objective in a way where you start to maybe understand that rider's way of riding, or what do you do to sort of keep fresh for each ride?
No, I don't find it difficult, but it's really interesting. Going back to the earlier thing I said about our National Trainers Club, we all grew up together, but I was the only one who went really down the judging route, as it were. And so, you know, I found myself in this situation where I had to judge my friends and colleagues. And for me, the important thing was to judge them realistically, because they're very knowledgeable people. If I'd given them high marks for something they did badly, they would laugh at me.
Yeah.
And if I gave them low marks for something they did well, they'd kill me.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't. To me, it's like my mind goes like into a video camera mode, and I just try to record how it is. And I'm always happy to discuss with riders if they want to afterwards. I always, make it clear if a rider wants to discuss something that they didn't understand or maybe didn't agree with, as long as they bring their sheet and they're reasonably polite,
Yes, of course.
I'm happy to discuss it. But I would not ever force my opinion.
No.
I would never go up to a rider and say, "Oh, why did you do this or that?" But if they came up to me and said, "Could you explain why I got these marks for this movement?" Then I would be happy to do so. But
you have judged the Olympics, World Championships, and lots of other big events. What goes into your mind prior to the event and after the event? Because it's high pressure work.
It's a little bit like the competing. Obviously, you're a little bit nervous before you start. And I always think if I ever stopped being a bit nervous before I start, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
You need that sort of adrenaline to perform at your best. But it can be quite stressful, especially before it starts. I will never forget in Athens Olympic Games, was 2004. In those days, we had a rotating. There were only 5 judges officiating, but there were 7 judges at the competition, and they would rotate through the 3: the Grand Prix, the Grand Prix Special, and the Freestyle, and they would rotate. So each judge would actually do 2 of the sections, which was felt to be fair. Now we have the 7 judges all do it, which I think is even better. But I can remember sitting in the hotel the night before the Grand Prix began in Athens, and Mariette Vitagas was president. She was then chairman of the dressage committee, and we didn't actually know who was going to be judging the next day.
Yeah.
There was some pressure from the press, and she was trying to protect, everyone, and so it was sort of almost kept a secret.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remain calm through the dinner, and finally my nerve broke and I said, Marriott, I'm sorry, I have to know, am I judging tomorrow or not? Oh yes, so the Grand Prix takes 2 days. Yes, you're judging, and yes, you're sitting at sea. And, that was a scary thought. But the joke is, once the first horse comes down the centre line, you go into autopilot and just do your job.
Yeah. And do you see the list beforehand that who's going to come in?
Just before we start.
Yeah. Who's coming in?
But yeah, it's a lot of pressure, but it's good. I like it.
And after the event, do you just go, I'm done?
It's surprising.
Yeah. Or are you still on a bus after, or is it just that drained?
No, a couple of days afterwards, you find you're suddenly very tired.
Yes. Yeah. But it must be a great experience.
Yes.
Important job.
Yeah.
But what an experience, and to be able to sit there.
Very fortunate to do it. It was Eric Letter, who was also previously chairman of the FEI Dressage Committee. Before I, came up the ladder, as it were, I was judging a small show in England, and he was there. And suddenly I got this phone call, and he said, "Oh, would you like to come to Holland to judge the Winter National Championships?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if I'm experienced enough." And, "Oh, no, you come." And he kept saying, "And it's not a test, it's not a test, just come, it'll be fine." And got there and said, "Here, you're sitting here, and it's not a test." And he kept saying this. And finally, at the end of the competition, he said, "By the way, you passed the test." And he was responsible for pushing me, because I didn't really have so much ambition to become a judge. But he was I always say now, I spoke to him the other day when I saw you, because I always say everything is his fault, because he made me do this and he made me do that.
He saw the potential.
Yeah, but what a wonderful mentor he was, because he really changed the sport through his philosophy and fair-mindedness, and a great man.
What was his philosophy?
Not being afraid to give the high marks when they're good, and not being afraid to be honest when there's a problem, and to judge what you see, but no, he was great, and it was really, he was responsible for the development of the freestyle being one of the main part of the championships. And there was quite a lot of opposition to that at the beginning, that, it's a bit too much like circus or whatever. But he recognized, he had this foresight, that we wanted to take dressage more out to the public. And it was the freestyle to music that was the most attractive thing for more people, especially less educated dressage people. A beautiful horse going beautifully to fabulous music can be appreciated by everyone.
And I think you see a bit of the rider as well, because they can put their soul into it.
Yes.
And that is a bit like an art form, that as well.
Yeah.
Do you think, is there a difference when judging nowadays compared to when you started with thinking about riders and horses?
A difference?
Yeah, like have the horses changed?
Well, yes. You know, I never feel that they ever get quite enough recognition, but you know, the breeding programs in all countries all around the world, you know, have produced now these naturally athletic horses that, through their composition, their temperament, their conformation, have become much easier to train because they're built to do the job. They're natural athletes. And, you know, back in the day, if you ever saw something like that, it was almost a freak.
Yeah.
Whereas now, most riders have access to these wonderful athletic horses that find the movements more natural and easy. Having said that, you can train every horse, regardless of its you know, natural athleticism. You can improve every horse through dressage. So,
do you think that the riding have changed, the quality of the riders or the knowledge of the riders since you first started?
yes, I think it's there's now a much more sort of worldwide system, and I think people now have a greater understanding of the theoretical side as well, and how to be more systematic in the way they train horses. And there's been so much knowledge shared by so many people that, yeah, I think the sport has developed hugely.
And the horses meant in their mind, are they more complicated, do you think? Or is that
Well,
the
you
same?
know, I don't know about you, but there are not so many easy horses. Every horse that has a lot of ability will also maybe have some temperament things, and they're all so different. But I think that's the fascinating part, is to learn how to deal with each horse mentally, and to you know, develop a training program that suits it both physically and mentally to bring out the best in it.
Which event that you've been judging have shaped you the most?
Oh,
difficult question.
Yes, that's because to me, I judge all sorts of different level competitions, and yeah, it's very exciting to judge the very top championships, but it's also interesting to judge some of the smaller shows with the maybe more amateur type riders. I enjoy that. And again, I'm always open to discussion, and you can have a lot of fun. And when people realize that actually you are approachable, it's really interesting. And to learn about people's attitudes can be interesting. And yeah, you know, everyone has to learn. It's the whole game is a learning process, and it's fascinating to watch people develop. I find it particularly interesting, you know, having judged from the beginning junior or young rider competitions, and to see those riders, you know, now becoming Olympic riders is having watched them on their journey has been very interesting.
And that's the key word, I think, in everything is the journey. It's all a journey when we're training a horse, or when we're competing, or the people we meet. Very interesting. So I think I've had, like I said in the beginning, 6 years of lessons with you. And it was very interesting when you said that when you're judging, you always think of the positives first. And that is one of the things that you have when you teach. You always see the positives first, which makes you very relaxed as a rider. And also then afterwards you come with, what can be changed. What is it that keeps you inspired teaching people, coaching riders?
I find it fascinating. I think it's training other riders is, I think, probably the most difficult aspect of riding, judging or training, because unlike the judging, it's not just being aware of maybe what the problems are, but then you have to fix it, which is fascinating. And for me, I try to train riders as I would like to be trained myself. Some people react differently to others. For me, when I'm training, I don't care what level the rider is at, as long as they have a positive attitude and they really want to learn something, then I'll sit there all day. It's fine. And if they're not like that, then I find that I'm too busy. But it's interesting, I think, for me, the main thing when you're training a rider, regardless of the level they're at, is to try to set them achievable goals. There's no point, destroying them mentally and making them do things that they're not ready to do. It just destroys their confidence. So for me, I try and assess where the rider is up to in the level they're training, and then to try to build from that, or maybe alter that so it's possible to develop it further. But I think you've got to, just like training horses, you've got to make people believe that it is possible for them to be able to achieve something. And it's the same way with the horses too.
And that's so interesting, because when I've spoken to other people that have trained for you, I think that's what we all come out with confidence. And when you feel confident, you trust your feel. And feel is so important when riding. And I guess also that you have to be allowed to get it wrong in order to get it right.
Sure.
Because if you don't get that experience, then we don't know, and then we get insecure with what we are looking for.
Yep.
What have you learned about yourself when training or coaching riders and horses?
My problem is that if something goes wrong, I always think it's my fault because I haven't told the rider how to do it properly. So I'm very self-critical about that. But I think you have to accept that sometimes it takes some people longer than others to get the point. And for me, I've learned, I was going to say patience. It's not really patience. It's about being realistic. I will repeat the same message. If they don't understand it, maybe I'll try it from a different angle or different wording to see if there's a way. But basically, I keep on with the same message and accept the fact that maybe it will take them a while to get it. You know. I always found with like working pupils who you train daily, a little bit the same as with the horses. I always found actually it took me probably 2 years before they really understood what I was talking about. And the same with the horses. I've never had a horse that it hasn't taken at least 2 years to form a real partnership with.
And you can't hurry a process.
No.
The process has to have its course because it's just as important as the goal.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
Is there any memory in particular that you cherish from thinking about your coaching?
Yeah, I really do enjoy that side of things, and you know, to see people develop, and okay, it's not about winning gold medals, but to see them developing from one stage to the next. On many people I train don't have the best horses in the world, but to see them being able to improve the basis of each horse and to maybe reach heights that they originally didn't think were achievable, that's very rewarding. Yeah.
What are the most, well, we have touched that a little bit, what are the most challenging aspects of teaching? What do you think is the most difficult concept to teach?
I think a lot of it is to do with riders' own self-discipline, learning and understanding that sitting correctly is number one. And it takes riders quite a long time to really understand that the way they sit absolutely influences the way the horse goes. So, you know, they might think they're having a problem with the horse, but in fact, it's because of the way they're sitting that's creating the problem. So to try to get into the mind of the rider, to discipline themselves to sitting absolutely correctly and applying effective and sympathetic aids, really, until they understand that, then there will be a limit on how far they can go.
And how do you get that message through? Is it about waiting for the time when they are ready for it, or is it, I guess it's a process, but is it sometimes about just being blunt about it, or is it finding a way where it can come across when it's important?
I think it's about first trying to get the riders to understand how important it is, and how they should improve themselves. But then you're left dealing with, you know, old habits die hard. And for me, it's like a sort of tap dripping process. You know, I don't make a big thing of it, but I always just mention, you know, especially if someone tends to sit a little crooked, or it's impossible for the horse to go well if the rider is crooked. So there's always this little reminder, and to try to make people more self-aware about how they sit.
So we are in sort of the end of it all. I think that we often have an inner compass to what we want from life. We are not perhaps always understanding at the time what the direction we are traveling, but that inner compass is still very much in the background to the decisions we take. Looking back on your journey, what do you think has been your inner compass?
I think it's about realizing that you don't know everything. And I can think back to, books I've read, or people have said things to me over the years that I've thought I've understood. But it's not until later, suddenly, from the feeling from a horse, for instance, you suddenly that's what they were talking about. And then the penny drops, and I think for me it's learning and accepting to be open-minded enough to take on board what everyone has to give you, but still being strong enough mentally to keep your line,
And that is so true. And it's this way of thinking that I think why I've been so inspired by your journey and learned so much with my time with you. So thank you so much for doing this. It's been a great way of sort of finding out a little bit more your thinking behind your teaching and your judging and your career. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much. Really enjoyed it.
Nice.